Good evening, America. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you from Washington, D.C., a very consequential moment ahead of us here. I'm also reporting to you from the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. You know this. Wired Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News, and you can go right now to wired2fishcoffee.com and get a fantastic 10% discount on all of the great coffees and all of the great mugs, ornaments, gifts, even the new Just the News Tumblr. Go check it out. If you go to the checkout, use Just News there, you get 10% off. It's pretty easy. All right, we're going to focus on two extraordinary consequential things that are on the immediate horizon for America. All of our guests today, we're going to really drill down. One is the extraordinary danger that America faces when it comes to spending. If we keep these spending levels up for another few years, we will move ourselves toward bankruptcy. And today we got another reminder of that when the Social Security and Medicare trust funds told us they're actually going to start running out of money a year earlier than expected. Have to start cutting payments as early as 2033, which, by the way, it's not that far around. We're going to talk to Senator Ron Johnson, who put out an amazing report today, put out some really important data points for all of us to consider. He'll kick our show off in a second. The second thing I want to talk about is the consequential decision that our president will soon make about whether to add U.S. military might to Israel's attacks on the nuclear the nuclear weapons program that Iran was building and that Israel has been attacking the last several days. We've given you a lot of data points over the last few days, what other people are saying, what the intelligence really was. No, Iran wasn't days away from having a nuclear weapon, but it was getting very close to having the fuel necessary for a nuclear weapon, a very important threshold. Yes, there is a lot of concern about whether MAGA will stay with the president on this issue, since we talk often in this country about not having more forever wars. Tonight, I want to give you one other data point and one exclusive document, probably something you've never seen before. Up on the screen here, they're going to put it up here. It's a secret cable that Bill Clinton sent to Iran's president in 1999. It's a remarkable document. I got it a few years ago under the Freedom of Information Act. It's really relevant today because it is a reminder of two things. One, Democrats have repeatedly tried to appease Iran to the detriment of America. And two, over the last 46 years, since the U.S. Embassy was taken hostage in Tehran in 1979, nearly 1,000 Americans have died at the hands of Iran. What this memo says is that Bill Clinton told Iran's president something he wasn't willing to tell the American people. Bill Clinton never told the American people that Iran was behind the Khobar Towers terror attack that killed 19 Americans. But he told Iran's leader he knew it. And he said, hey, if you just act like good guys, we'll let this thing go. We want good relations with you. We'll slip it under the rug. All you have to do is just arrest the guys that did Khobar Towers and we'll let it all go. No consequence for Iran's behavior. Not when they killed 260 plus Americans at a Marine barracks in Beirut in 1983. Not when they killed the 19 at Khobar Towers. Not when they killed the 603 soldiers who the Pentagon says died from Iranian-made IEDs. It's just another data point that President Trump, I think, has on his radar as he tries to make the decision whether to fully and completely eradicate the Iranian nuclear program with bunker buster bombs that only our B-2s can deliver. A lot of other things on the table, but we want to get that information to you. We're going to have more on that memo. We're going to make it available for everybody to read in the morning in a whole detail. We're going to give you that roll call of the 1,000 deaths so you know who they were, when they died, and how they died. But now it's an amazing time to turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head, and get some more news. Amanda?
Absolutely. All right, so we have some Supreme Court news to get to earlier today. They had a big decision come down dealing with the state of Tennessee, their ban on youth transgender surgery. It also banned the use of puberty blockers and hormone therapy, and the court sided with the state of Tennessee, upholding that ban. Now, the vote was 6-3, of course, divided among ideological lines, with Chief Justice John Roberts writing the opinion. The Chief Justice said that the law was not in violation of the Constitution's 14th Amendment, and it does not constitute a form of sex discrimination. Now, this is an important decision because 24 other states have laws that are very similar to Tennessee's, which was just upheld. So it will most likely have a very, very large impact. And turning to some economic news, the Federal Reserve under Chairman Jerome Powell decided not to lower interest rates, keeping them in the 4.25 to 4.5% range. The central bank said it was worried about President Trump's tariffs and their impact. And even though inflation has been on a downward trajectory since President Trump took office, the Fed said that they were worried about an uptick. Now, President Trump was asked about all of this earlier today, just before the Fed's announcement, and he answered it the only way that he can. Here it is.
We're doing well, and as a country, if the Fed would ever lower rates, would buy debt for a lot less. It's a shame. This guy, do you ever have a guy that's not a smart person and you're dealing with him and you have to deal? He's not a smart guy. He's worried about inflation. I said, that's right. If there's inflation in 6 months or 9 months, you lower the rates or you raise the rates. You can do whatever you want, Brian, right? We have a stupid person, frankly, at the Fed.
This is something that President Trump has talked about even before he became president, even before he ran. This is something he has always harped on about back when it was Twitter. And here he is in the Oval Office again, and he's still dealing with the same issues.
Well, the reason we have some of that crushing debt expense is because we've had so much crushing spending for the last, almost 80% of all the debt we accumulate in the history of this country, 250 years, has occurred in the last 20 years of this Congress. Somebody who takes that seriously and who has shouted it out often, though it's not popular among his fellow senators and House members in the Congress, is Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. And today he put out an extraordinary report just looking at the mess we're in smart, simple data points to help us understand how we might be able to get out of it. We're lucky to be joined by him at the top of the show today. Senator, great to have you back on the show.
Hello, John. Hello, Amanda. Thanks for having me on.
All right, there's two things I find remarkable about this report. One is just the CEO mentality and the way you look at the data, the way a CEO would if they were trying to fix a company. The second part is you wrote this all by yourself, no staff, right? This is your work.
Well, staff definitely helped me format the report. I'm not very good with word processors, but no, this is something I've been working on really since I wrote my op-ed for the Wall Street Journal on January 1st, where I laid out the concept of returning to a pre-pandemic level of spending. And I laid out 3 different options by going back to Bill Clinton in 1998, Obama in 2014, Trump in 2019, exempt Social Security, Medicare, and interest, spend what you need to spend, but all those other outlays, just increase them by population growth and inflation. And what kind of spending level will we have? Well, the answer is somewhere between $5.5 and $6.5 trillion versus the more than $7 trillion we'll spend this year, about $7.3 trillion next year. So we are in a very dangerous zone in terms of locking in deficits of over $2 trillion over the next 10 years. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers. Let me just give you some base pieces of information. In the 7 years prior to COVID, the average deficit was $660 billion. Still way too high, but I wish we were there at this point. Then we had COVID, but then the 4 years after that, any rational human being would have said, okay, well, we can't stay at this $6.5 trillion level. We need to go back to pre-pandemic deficit and spending levels. That's not what Biden and the Democrats did. They continued to spend at about $6.5 trillion, now $7, but they incurred an average deficit each year of about $1.9 trillion. So we went from $660 billion to $1.9. And unfortunately, according to CBO, over the next 10 years, that deficit will average 2.1. According to CBO, with their score of the One Big Beautiful Bill, that'll be $2.4 trillion per year, $24 trillion in total. So again, these are massive numbers. One of the reasons I decided to do this report is I wanted to demonstrate this graphically, because I've been going on shows like this, spouting numbers like this. I realize it goes over most people's heads, but when you see it graphically, it's pretty shocking. You see where George Bush was at $250 billion a year. You see that pre-pandemic level, and then you see where we are, where we've been for the last 4 and where we're heading. We've got to do something about this. And listen, I think the House has done some good work. I know people understand this problem from a standpoint of we got to do something about it, but I'm not sure people really understand the depth of the problem. So my role has been to, as a CEO, I've solved a lot of problems. The first step in solving a problem is admitting you have one and then properly defining it. So I'm trying to properly define it, lay out different scenarios, show that, economic growth is a huge component of a solution, but we're not going to get to a balanced budget by just growing the economy. We have got to reduce spending to a pre-pandemic level.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a money problem, but I think for a lot of folks, it's a very nebulous money problem that is not really hitting home just yet. Speaking of showing things graphically and putting it out there very simply for the American people, I think when people hear that we should go back to pre-pandemic levels, their first question is, what does that mean? And second of all, sir, the difference between the two can't just be mandatory spending with inflation. There's got to be discretionary garbage in there that's easily cuttable.
Well, if you just go back to 2019, exempt Social Security, Medicare, and even Medicaid and defense, exempt all that spending. You've got almost $400 billion of spending that exceeds what we spent in 2019, completely plus up for Biden's inflation and population. I think it's like $384 billion. Again, that's going back to 2019. You go back all the way to Bill Clinton, include Medicaid in that, and we're spending $1.3 trillion more than what Bill Clinton spent, fully inflated for population inflation. So again, that's where you get the $5.5 to $6.5 trillion. So how do you get back to that level? It's not looking at 2 or 3 programs, making a couple tweaks and getting a CBO score. You have to literally go line by line, like Doge did, contract by contract, program by program. Do you realize we have over 2,600 programs in the federal government? And my belief is if we do the work, it's going to take a lot of work, but having gone from 4.4 trillion to over $7 trillion, 2,600 programs, I've got to believe that you can eliminate hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds of federal government programs, and nobody would even notice, except for the grifters who are sucking down all that waste, fraud, abuse, and pork.
So I want to ask a little bit, why don't Republicans have the same passion you do for this? They all talk it big every 2 years in elections, but cutting $180 billion when you've added $2 trillion a year, $180 billion average per year when you've added $2 trillion in the last 5 years annually to the budget is a joke. Why don't they have more passion, more courage, more willingness to get down, roll up their sleeves, and submit something that actually would get this deficit down?
Because this is the way this place is operating. We've never had a method to or a process to control spending. We don't have a balanced budget requirement. I didn't realize this, but the appropriation committees were actually established because the authorizing committees were big spenders. Well, that didn't work. Simpson-Bowles didn't work. The Budget Act didn't work. Actually, the Budget Control Act did work for a couple of years. We reduced discretionary spending by about $175 billion over 3 years. That was the impact of the Tea Party. Barack Obama came in. Again, George Bush averaged $250 billion per year deficits. Barack Obama came in and averaged almost $1.3 trillion in his first term. $1.3 trillion. That sparked the Tea Party. We came in and we literally put pressure on the process. We held federal government spending flat for about 5 years, about $3.5 trillion. Well, wouldn't it be great if we were only spending $3.5 trillion? We'd have a $2 trillion surplus, basically. But again, those are the numbers. Listen, we got a bunch of lawyers in Congress. I found that my colleagues don't like numbers that much. They're not all that nuts about me listening to all these numbers all the time, showing them all my charts, but I'm pretty relentless.
Yes,
you
indeed. Sir, I want to ask you about another critical situation, the conflict between Israel and Iran. From day to day, we have no idea minute to minute, we have no idea what's going to happen. But if President Trump comes up to Capitol Hill and says, I need you to approve, we want to get involved on an official and tangible level, do you think that would pass?
Well, first of all, I don't think President has to do that. He's the commander in chief. If he sees a clear and present danger, he can act. And I would support him in that. Listen, this is such a tragedy. The Iranian people, we don't have any beef with the Iranian people. We don't have any beef with Chinese people or Russians or even North Korean people. We have a problem with their dictatorial regimes. Mm-hmm. And the Iranian people have been under the thumb of a brutal dictatorial regime. They don't support them. They are the largest state sponsor of terror. They threaten our shipping lanes through their proxies. They obviously threaten Israel. They've way overplayed their hand. And what Israel's done over the last year or so, since October 7th, they've just basically dismantled all their proxies. And now they've dismantled their air defense systems. And Iran is just sitting there vulnerable. So it's a choice really for the Iranian people at this point in time. I think the mullahs are weak. They don't have the security apparatus. I just truly hope that the Iranian people take the bull by the horns and demand their freedom, turn that into far more democratic, Western-leaning society. We would welcome them into the free nations of the world.
Sir, I would be remiss if I didn't ask to get your reaction before we let you go to the report we had earlier this week that the FBI in 2020 got meaningful intelligence that China was trying to hijack the election with fake mail and ballots. Rather than fully investigate it, even though they had some corroborating evidence, they swept it under the rug. Now, you highlighted the abuses of the Russia collusion case where they had no evidence, but they opened up. You highlighted the ignorance of the Hunter Biden investigation, not willing to look at clear criminality. What's your thought when you hear that the FBI saw a threat to an election and didn't intervene?
Well, you understand exactly how partisan the FBI has been. And by the way, the deep state continues. I knew this wasn't going to be immediate, radical transparency in these agencies, and it's not. I know the heads of the agencies want to get Congress information. It's a tough slog. Yep. So we've got a real problem. I mean, the root cause of our problems with government is government itself, the size of it, the scope of it, the cost of it. Until the American public understands that and stops looking to the federal government to solve all their problems, recognizing that the federal government creates more problems, exacerbates more problems than it ever solves, and just starts demanding to start shrinking it, demand that they can keep more of their own hard-earned tax dollars, we're still going to have a deep state. So this is about winning the hearts and minds of the American public and get them to realize that the federal government is, we need some government. Our founders realized that. We're men and women, we're not perfect. If we don't want to live in anarchy and chaos, you need some government. But government is something by and large to fear, which is why they tried to establish this constitutional framework to put checks and balances to limit government's power over us. Because when you grow government, our freedoms just necessarily recede.
A wise man said something similar in an earlier time in history. I think it was Ronald Reagan who said, government's not the solution, it's the problem right now. And you are echoing that with all the great work you're doing. Sir, great honor to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Have a great evening.
Yeah, great conversation and great work on that data. Such important stuff. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Amanda and I had a great chance to talk with Senator Marsha Blackburn. Some amazing stuff on anti-doping and China cheating in the Olympics and a whole lot more. You're not going to want to miss it right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. Earlier today, we sat down with the senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, one of our favorite folks, and she is obviously a colleague of our last guest, Senator Ron Johnson. So take a look at this.
All right, joining us now, someone I say brings a healthy dose of common sense to a sea of insanity in Washington, the great senator from the state of Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn. Senator, good to have you on.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
I really enjoyed this hearing yesterday. I'm a sports aficionado in my spare time, and I didn't realize how many problems we've had with the International Anti-Doping Agency. Tell us a little bit about what we've learned, the China element to it, and where Congress probably stands on this now.
Indeed, I think it is so important to note that we know that in 2021, when Katie McLaughlin, who was with us yesterday, was given a silver medal, she was beat out by a Chinese swimmer. 23 swimmers had been accused of doping. Well, China said, oh, it was some TMZ that accidentally was in the food. What we found out was the pounds of food they would have had to have consumed and the gallons of water they would have had to have consumed in order to get that amount of TMZ in their bodies was not even something that was plausible that they could have eaten that much every day consistently. So there were 23 swimmers all total. They garnered 96 medals, and they knocked many of our athletes off the podium. And the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA as we term it, did nothing. But it seemed that what they did do was to work in a back room with China to accept China's explanation for this. And of course, then China put more money into WADA for contributions and for investigations. Because of this, the United States had withheld their money because our athletes are being disadvantaged. And it's not only China. Russia, of course, we have had some infraction from them also. And it seems that WADA is cutting backroom deals and not protecting athletes.
Doping in communist countries? I have never heard of that. Senator, I want to ask you about their attitude towards this hearing and their willingness to give up information. It seems like they were pretty belligerent about handing over anything, and not only that, but also maybe kind of subtly threatened the Salt Lake City Games?
Yes, indeed. We heard that they had subtly threatened the Olympic Committee regarding the Salt Lake Games because they wanted to hold it over the head of the U.S. and then say, well, they weren't going to let us have these games. Well, this is more of their backroom deal making that they are trying to do. And WADA is not able to be trusted on this. And you're correct that they would not turn over any information, nor did they show up at the hearing, nor have they properly responded to any of our requests. So clearly, they are hiding something. If there was nothing to hide, they would comply with the request. So we'll continue on this issue. I chair Consumer Protection Data Security. This is an issue that comes before us, and we will continue to work on this issue to protect our U.S. athletes so that they are able to train, to compete fairly, and to win successfully.
Yeah. Clearly just cheating was going on, and the body that was supposed to stop it actually sanctioned it. It's just remarkable to see such great work. Senator, I want to turn to a subject that's dear to our hearts, a story we broke here a couple days ago and have continued to follow up on. The FBI got credible intelligence that China was sending fake driver's licenses into the United States to create fake mail-in ballots. The CPB intercepted some of the fake driver's licenses. The FBI pulled back its investigation, in fact, ordered other intelligence agencies they had shared the intelligence with to destroy their intelligence report, get rid of any of the evidence of what the suspicion was. Your thoughts about that era of time with Chris Wray and the FBI and how we fixed it under Kash Patel?
Yes, and this is one of those things. And you know, John, what is so amazing is we heard these tidbits about China trying to do something with fraudulent ballots to go into these states that were toss-up states and throw the election. So we were hearing that, but then there was nothing that was done, and the FBI said there is nothing to it. It's internet rumor. We all remember that. And now we find out, just as we're finding out in many things, much of this internet rumor are things that would be slipping out by a whistleblower, which of course the Biden administration would quickly discredit those individuals. Well, it's true. And I was really grateful that you all broke this report yesterday, because this is something that is lingered out there from the 2020 elections, and the fact that Border Patrol actually found some of this and tried to have it investigated, and the FBI said, don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Yeah. Just crazy.
It changes so many of the ways that we look at the 2020 election. Senator, I wanted to ask you about a plan that is supposedly in the Senate's version of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And I suppose it sets off a plan to sell 2 million acres initially to private land developers, fossil fuel developers, but that's to happen every 60 days. So these are public lands, BLM lands, migrant pattern corridors, hunting land, forestries, these types of areas. Is it a wise idea to sell those off?
One of the things that we do know is many people in the western states already have leases on that land for cattle, for horses, hunting, and there is tremendous concern about this. You've talked about some of that falls in migrant patterns, and Border Patrol has said, no, we need access to that land so that we can continue with closing these pathways that migrants have used. President Trump has been so successful in securing the border And you've got Secretary Noem and Tom Homan who have worked tirelessly on this issue. And we need to listen to Border Patrol when they say, here's an area we need to hold access to it. It's not saying, they're not saying, anyone's not saying you can't ever sell it. They're just saying this is not something that you can throw somebody up against a deadline, because there are people that actually are leasing this land from the federal government or something that our security interests need to have access to.
Yeah, important to have those sort of guardrails in there. Senator, one last one I want to turn to, and that is the issue of Iran. President is considering maybe joining Israel in a limited way, maybe some bunker buster bombs to finish off the nuclear program. Most Americans, because it happens episodically, don't realize the large, long, tortured history of Iran, specifically killing Americans. More than 1,000 when you add the IEDs that were deployed in Iraq during the war. If President Trump gets a chance to finish off the nuclear program or take out the regime, what is your thoughts on him acting?
President Donald Trump has handled this issue so incredibly well. He said, I'm going to give Iran 60 days to get to the table. They did not come to the table. So day 61, you saw Israel begin with their action. My understanding is the president is closely monitoring this. He is very much engaged in watching this, getting intel and information from Netanyahu. I know that when there is a decision to be made, he is going to make the wise decision. He has a goal of no more endless wars. He has had an ultimatum. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And for everybody that is saying we want peace in the Middle East, if you want peace in the Middle East, you cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
And no doubt in your mind over the years that Iran's been at war with America through its proxies, its terrorism, and its IEDs.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, you know,
really
and
remarkable.
Iran's been making their money selling their oil to China. And under President Trump's first term, you had sanctions on Iran, and they were broke. They couldn't fund their proxies. And then you have them come along with Biden, taking that off, making deals with them, sending them $6 billion. You give Iran $1, it's going to go one of two places. It is going to go into uranium enrichment or funding proxies. It's not going to go to the people. That's why the Iranian people are ready for regime change.
Yeah, I believe they are. Senator, great to have you on the show today. Congratulations on all the great work you're doing in the Senate.
Thank you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with more of these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. So much happening on Capitol Hill today. First, a lot of speculation about what is coming next in the Israel-Iran conflict and if the U.S. should get involved. We also have the Democrats trying to force a national conversation on President Trump's popular immigration position that seems to be getting ever more popular. And joining us to break it all down is Colorado Congressman Jeff Crank. Congressman, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you, Amanda. Great to be with you guys.
Yeah, happy to have you. And, you know, I hail from California. In fact, I moved here right after those devastating fires in Pacific Palisades and Pasadena. But Colorado, a lot of states are no stranger to wildfires. Tell us about a new bill that you introduced that deals with this and kind of maps out for everyone to know exactly what are the, I guess, pun intended, hotspots.
Yeah, well, I think it's important. We don't do a whole lot that's bipartisan in Congress these days, but one thing we can do, hopefully, is help fight wildfires. And I introduced a bill. We do, I think, have some bipartisan support on this bill, but it's going to really force the government to do a better job of forecasting, doing fire weather forecasting, helping states and communities understand through mapping and other means what areas we need to be careful with regard to fire. So it's really trying to create more cooperation and coordination between the federal government and state and local governments. And of course, wildfires in Colorado, as you mentioned, California, so many western states particularly, but boy, we're even seeing it in other places as well. It's a real problem, and it's just devastating to communities that it hits.
Yeah, no, it really is, and it's good to see the bipartisan action. It's something that's been neglected for a while, fire prevention, certainly. So it's a great thing. So I want to turn to the issue everybody's talking about, and that is, will the U.S. join Israel in an offensive capacity as it tries to take out the Iranian nuclear program? Just like to get your thoughts on where you are as you see this play out. Is this a generational opportunity, or should we avoid the military conflict?
Well, look, there's moments in the history of the world where we just have to make tough decisions, and I think this is one of them. This is a moment we cannot allow, and I firmly stand behind the president's declaration that we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And we know that they've been trying to get one for well over a decade now. They're doing everything they can to do this. They've they've lied, they've cheated, they've done everything they can to hide the fact. They even schnookered the Obama administration. They schnookered the Biden administration and others. But all along, they've been developing this capability. And their reason they want to do it is to wipe Israel off the map and to also export that terror around the world through their proxies, through Hamas, through Hezbollah, and other agents to attack the United States. They're going to attack the country that they call the Great Satan, too. So, we can't let this happen. I would prefer to see this be an offensive effort by the Israelis, and that the United States not get involved in that, although we are already helping them. I know with sensors and detecting missile launches in a defensive capability, and I hope we will continue to do that. But if we have to do that, I think the president has to do what he has to do to protect the American people, and I'll be there to support him. I'm certainly there to support the people of Israel.
Yeah. And I think there's also a good point to be made when it comes to the protracted nature of what we saw in the early 2000s and having men and women overseas in the Middle East for 20 plus years. This is a very different scenario, is it not? Because this is something that you seize on this opportunity with Iran, get rid of their nuclear programs, and it's pretty fast.
Yeah, it is. It should be fast. And look, this is I mean, John, you said it. I mean, this is a generational opportunity. This is an extension of what President Trump did with the Abraham Accords. I think part of one of the greatest shames of the 2020 election is that we weren't able, if President Trump would have been in office from 2020 to 2024, I think the Abraham Accords would have taken root. And the Abraham Accords was really negotiated with states like Jordan and Saudi Arabia and others that were willing to recognize Israel's right to exist, and that if Israel had the right to exist, that they would live peacefully there. The main obstructor of that in the Middle East, whether it's the Arab states like Saudi Arabia and Jordan, or whether it's the Israelis, the main objector to peace there and to allowing Israel to remain on this planet, to be honest with you, is Iran. So I think the people of these other more moderate Arab states have been cheering us on and certainly been cheering Israel on in this. I think the whole world will be better off if we get rid of this Iranian regime. Let's just be honest about it. And this is just a moment we got to rise up to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you had a terrible terror attack, I think that's what we would call it, where anti-Semitism turned into hatred and then turned into murderous attempted murder. Can you tell us the latest of what you've learned? And is it true that this guy who was in the country had a driver's license, even though he wasn't supposed to be here anymore?
Yeah, John, I mean, it's shocking, really, when you think about it. And it's really what happens when governments refuse to work with one another and work to protect the American people. That's what we expect our governments to do. And when they fail, we need to hold them accountable for it. This assailant in the Boulder attacks was given a work permit. He was here on that work permit expired. And then months and months and months after that work permit expired, the state of Colorado gave him a driver's license. They gave him really a sanctuary license, is what I call it.
Yep.
Allowed him to work in the United States, despite the fact that he wasn't here legally to work. But gave him a driver's license so he could drive and be legitimate in Colorado. And I'll tell you another thing that we've discovered in that case is that, he applied, tried to get to buy a gun. The system worked. None of us, there's nobody who's pro Second Amendment who wants a non-citizen and a terrorist to get a hold of guns. They did a background check on him. It came back and said, no, you can't buy a gun because you're not a citizen. But guess what? The state of Colorado, Jared Polis's Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and Joe Biden's FBI knew that he failed that background check. They knew it, but yet they didn't pass that on to ICE and say, hey, get this guy out of the country. He's trying to buy guns and he's here illegally. You would think that the American people would want our government to work together to get these kind of people out of our nation.
Colorado rewarded bad behavior, and then he rewarded Colorado with even more heinous behavior. It's just a remarkable set of circumstances you've been able to dig up, sir.
Yeah, it is. It's so frustrating because I know that there's so many good people, law enforcement here in Colorado, in my county. My sheriff works hard to work with ICE, but we've just got politicians that just don't see it that way, and we've just got to get to a point where the American people make them pay a political price for this kind of behavior. Where they just thumb their nose at the federal government and, frankly, at law and order.
Yeah. Congressman, really quickly before we let you go, you have these pro-Palestinian protesters, and now you have in cities across this country the anti-ICE raid protesters. They seem to be flying a lot of the same flags. What's the common ideology there?
Yeah, well, they're flying, they're making commercials, TV ads, really, I think, for the next Republican presidential race, to be honest with you, with some of the stuff that they're doing. Yeah, we're seeing people with these, the Palestinian flags and waving Palestinian flags, and people standing on burned out vehicles in Los Angeles waving the Mexican flag. I mean, it's offensive to the American people. And I'll tell you what's really offensive is you got a lot of people in the Democrat Party that are seeing this and sort of latching onto it and, trying to have this kind of bad behavior. Senator Alex Padilla of California and others just acting, sort of boorish, like they're entitled because they're a senator or they're a member of Congress to walk into any federal building at any time, and charge a stage. I mean, it's incredible to see some of the actions of the politicians. But you know what? These politicians are emboldening these citizens that are acting, non-citizens in a lot of cases, that are acting this way. But look, President Trump's done a good job. Good leaders stand up and provide for law and order in their communities. We need that in California. We need it in Colorado. We need it all across America.
Yeah,
so important.
I know if it was any everyday American, and if it was me or John, and we put our hands on a law enforcement officer, we would probably see the same thing. So it doesn't really matter if you're a United States senator.
Yeah, you would. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee, and I was just out yesterday visiting one of our local military installations. And you know what? I had to go through security. I had to go through the gate. I had to show him my ID. I had to let him check me in. I mean, it is arrogance beyond arrogance for a member of Congress or a United States senator to think that just because of their position, they can show up somewhere and, they have to be admitted onto a base.
Yes, sir.
Be courteous, be kind, call them and let them know you're coming, for goodness sakes.
Absolutely. I bet he sent out some fundraising emails after that, though. Jeff Crank from the great state of Colorado, thank you so much for being here, sir. And next, we're going to take a closer look at the Supreme Court upholding that Tennessee ban on youth transgender surgery. Hallelujah. Right after this break.
Welcome back, America. The Supreme Court made a big decision, as Amanda mentioned at the top of the show, with a Tennessee law banning youth transgender surgery, puberty blockers, and hormone therapy. They ruled 6-3 that it was a lawful ban. Supreme Court isn't done yet with a number of cases still on the docket. Joining us now to talk about all of that and her new book out titled Lawless Lawfare, Tipping the Scales of Justice to Get Trump and Destroy MAGA. She's also an attorney in Washington Times Legal Fair reporter. I got to work with her when I was at the Washington Times. She's one of the best journalists I know, Alex Swoyer. Alex, good to have you back on.
Thank you for having me. And yes, I learned so much from you. Thank you so much for
It was
bringing me to DC and teaching me the whole journalism industry. It's a wild game here in the Beltway.
that it is. You didn't do much training. You're a fantastic journalist and a great lawyer too. Today was a big day. I think a lot of people were holding their breath, wondering what would this decision be on the transgender
Yeah.
ban. Your thoughts on how the court came down?
Yeah, so this case actually, out of the whole term, was the one that was most watched. Since they started live streaming the oral arguments back after COVID, you don't see as many people coming into the courtroom, especially the press. But with this Skrmetti case, the Tennessee Attorney General defending this law, it was packed. Even the press section where you couldn't even see the bench was filled. And so it was the one I think that most people are waiting for. I was surprised actually it came out this week. I thought maybe they would save it to the very last day of the term. But coming out of oral arguments, it did seem like Tennessee had the upper hand. So I was not surprised by the decision today, upholding that law, banning, as you mentioned, medical treatment for transgender youth. The decision basically came down to the majority, the 6 GOP appointees, saying that this law really turned on age and the actual diagnosis versus sex. And that was what the transgender youth, their parents, and a doctor were arguing, that it was a sex discrimination issue and that the court should give it higher scrutiny.
Yeah, and there are going to be a lot of implications for this because other states either already have similar laws or are in the process of them, right?
You're right. I think there's about 27 states that have similar laws. And so with this precedent, their laws look pretty darn strong unless those challengers are able to come in and point to some sort of holes that aren't as that there might be that the court didn't address in this Tennessee case.
All right, tell us about the book for a second, because weaponization is something close, dear to my heart. I've been watching this go on for 2 decades, wondering, will it ever stop? How much worse can it get? You do such a great job in this book of laying out how we got this moment. Tell us some of the highlights of where we are and how we get out of the mess we're in.
Yeah, it was disheartening for a reporter and also a lawyer to watch what I have seen basically since covering Capitol Hill in the Trump era, the first Trump administration, but then especially during the campaign season this last year. I have a group of friends from law school that I stayed in touch with, and I would by no means say everyone was a Trump supporter in that group, but every time we saw a new case come against Donald Trump, we all were like, this is just wild. Like the charges were questionable. So what I did was I went through basically in this book and documented what I argue the start of the lawfare against Trump was really the Russia investigation when he first announced his first campaign for president. And it went from special counsel then to impeachments, and then we graduated to indictments and so forth. And so each chapter takes a look at some of the cases that plagued the president as he campaigned. I spoke to Laura Trump and Don Jr., which I found very interesting, getting their take about what it was like going through this while campaigning. Laura Trump told me that every member of the family was pretty much impacted by the lawfare, that it even became hard to get a mortgage, which you would find surprising since this is one of the wealthiest families in America. Both her and Don Jr. said that they thought 100% if their father hadn't won, that he would be in jail, that basically winning was the only way to keep Democrats from locking him up. There's just some interesting tidbits for sure that I found through my research. Some of the criminal cases that we saw the president face, he was, of course, gagged. He had gag orders on him. Yeah. And during that time, he did about 90 campaign rallies while under these gag orders. And if you care about the First Amendment, if you care about the protection of political speech, that should really trouble you. You know, you want your leading presidential candidate to be able to speak freely. And what we saw were these Democrat-appointed judges gagging him and basically restricting what he could say.
Okay, speaking of the First Amendment, because I have a feeling this probably plays into this case, although it strains credulity, a Texas law trying to ban the viewing of pornography by minors. Somebody on the other side is arguing against that. What is their argument?
Yes, I know. Some of the times that you see some of the challengers, you just scratch your head like, really? Some could say for the Tennessee law too. But with that being said, the concern is privacy rights, I guess having to enter too much personal data to be able to access a website. And so that's really what is up in this Texas case. Texas, like many other states, want to have porn websites require an age verification measure. And so the question is that through some sort of scan, like a facial scan? Is that through entering your personal data? And that's where the challengers have raised First Amendment concerns.
Gotcha.
Yeah, really amazing. Well, you said earlier, if we care about the First Amendment, we should be concerned what happened. If we care about facts, I think people should go read this book, Lawless Lawfare. You are an impeccable reporter with an incredible legal background as well. Lawless Lawfare, folks, go check out Alex. Great work. Go buy it. It's a great summer read as we head into vacation season. Alex, great to have you on today. Thanks for doing it. All right, a quick commercial break. When we come back, Amanda, I have a few final thoughts.
Welcome back, everybody. A few more headlines before we head out for the night. Now, I personally love any reporting that starts out a Florida man because I know something wild is about to follow.
You're going to get some DMs on that one, I think.
And apparently there is a Florida man reptile who has been roaming the sewers of Florida. Now, there's been this like urban legend around certain places, obviously Florida, that there were alligators in the sewer, and this guy proved it true.
Well, I guess it is, yeah. Well, look at that. Wow, that's kind of scary.
Now, I'm trying to figure out perspective.
Looks like a little guy, though, huh?
Yeah, I think he's a little guy. He looks a little clumsy. He looks like he's trying to get his...
Looks like how I would be if I was walking the sewer. Clumsy, yeah.
He kind of looks like he's having a nice time. He's just flopping along.
Strolling the sewer, who knew?
He might bite a finger off, that's it.
Yeah.
We got 10 of them. You can afford to lose one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, moral of the story, don't stick your hand down the sewer grate. That's what I say.
Indeed. Draw back and up. Okay, so I want to touch on something from our last guest regarding the Supreme Court decision out of Tennessee. Chuck Schumer is not too pleased about it. He called it awful. And John, again, I don't know why people fight so hard for minors to have the ability. Well, minors to have the ability
to... It's a lifelong decision for them.
It can sterilize.
Yeah, that's right.
And these are the same people who say that at 18 years old, you are not mentally competent enough to enter into a financial agreement with an educational institution. But at 14, you can decide to sterilize yourself?
This is one of those circumstances where it takes a village mentality just dominates. Elitists believe they know better than the rest of us and that they have the right to dictate our future. So if you're a kid and you're not old enough to make your own decision, we'll make it for you. And if we ruin your life, don't worry about it because we're elitists and we know better. I think Senator Schumer and the Democratic Party and those who advocate for this, listen, Great Britain's pretty liberal. Even it came around on this subject. This is a losing battle too. You look at the polling, it's like an 80-20 issue, maybe even more, 90-10.
Which makes it surprising to me that Chuck Schumer would come out against it. You know, Chuck Schumer on...
This is the party that likes Iranian terrorists, gang members, MS-13 gang members, and people who like to maim children. And I don't understand how they're trying to build a majority with these very fringe... They're making themselves more relevant, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, when we were talking to Senator Blackburn about WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and the American athletes who got screwed, for lack of better terms, out of medals, I think about that with respect to transgenders in sport. It's not an equal playing field when someone's doping, when someone is a dude playing against girls.
Cheating.
It's cheating. It's all cheating.
Right. Yeah, just like the senator said today. There's one Democrat that seems to be reading the polls and maybe even leaning into it. That's John Fetterman.
Indeed he is.
I don't know how much more the Democrats can ostracize him, but he just doesn't care. And it's kind of liberating when you find someone that isn't trapped by the voice of the minority or, the vocal fringe. And he's unhinged from the fringe, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I used to not understand how he could so audaciously walk up to Capitol Hill, walk up to his Senate office in gym shorts and a hoodie every day. Yeah. And seeing how he has maneuvered through all of the ostracizing, now I get it. It's because he doesn't care. He doesn't care what others think. I still don't like the wardrobe, but I like
agree.
what he's saying.
I think you should bring some respect when you come to an institution like that. But listen, there's an a streak of independence to him that clearly is frustrating his party. Now it's kind of fun to watch. It's a dynamic I haven't seen very often in my life.
It's nice to see.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's going to do it for us tonight. We will be back here at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Head over to justthenews.com for more explosive headlines. We'll see you tomorrow.